Hi guys, and welcome back to Mysteries of Sarah. You know something? I watched a video this morning and I'm gonna share it with you guys. And something that's a big mystery to me is how these teenagers and children get taken into the lifestyles by cartel members, by gang leaders, and they take our teenagers and our children and they turn them into these monsters. And it's a mystery to me how they could just turn in from good kids to killers. So let's get into the video. See what you guys think.
How many people did you kill?
I have no idea.
No idea. You lost track?
Okay, so
On March 4th, 2008, Gabriel Cardona, the leader of a Gulf Cartel Sicario cell, was arrested and charged for his involvement in 5 murders and 4 attempted murders. Pretty dark, but it's nothing compared to the things he did for the cartel as a teenager. These are the most evil teen cartel members in the world.
When was the first time for you, and how did it happen?
I was going on 13 years old the first time I took a life.
And I liked it.
Yes.
I felt like Superman. Why? Because I killed someone.
Rosalio Reda's journey from an impoverished childhood to becoming one of the most feared teen assassins in cartel history is a scary tale of seduction by power, wealth, and violence. Born into a large family in Laredo, Texas, Reda grew up in a neighborhood where cartel influence loomed over the streets. His early years were marked by a relatively normal childhood, but as he entered adolescence, his fascination with power and violence began to take hold. Interestingly, Reda dreamed of joining the Navy SEALs, idolizing the skills and discipline of commandos, but his path would take a far darker turn. He started getting into trouble, running away from home, and getting involved in petty crime. At first, Reda was arrested for marijuana possession, but later spent a year in juvie for firing a gun in public. However, these early crimes were just the beginning of a violent path. At the age of 13, Reda was recruited by the Zetas, paramilitary wing of the Gulf Cartel known for its extreme brutality. The recruitment process was swift and unforgiving. One day, he was taken to a remote ranch in Mexico, where a man was tied up on the ground. Miguel Trevino, better known as C40, one of the most feared cartel leaders, handed Reda a gun and gave him a choice: kill that man or be killed. In that moment, his transformation was complete. He pulled the trigger, and from that day forward, murder became his profession. Reda quickly became one of the cartel's most efficient young killers. He underwent 6 months of intense training, learning how to handle assault rifles, engaging in hand-to-hand combat, and carrying out high-profile assassinations. His precision as a marksman earned him the respect of his superiors, and he was soon dispatched on missions across both Mexico and the United States. Alongside his childhood friend Gabriel Cardona, he lived in a luxurious home in Laredo, Texas, always on standby for his next order to kill. The money flowed freely, and he'd get a retainer of $500 a week, plus bonuses of up to $10,000 to $50,000 per hit. On one occasion, as a reward for his work, he was gifted a $70,000 Mercedes-Benz. Parties hosted by cartel bosses were
This is sickening. They take these teenagers and think they got them living the high lifestyle, paying them good money and ruining their lives. They're going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. It's sickening. It makes me so upset.
extravagant, with cars, weapons, and women raffled off to keep these young assassins loyal and motivated. But beneath that wealth and status, Reda was becoming a remorseless killer. He likened the thrill of murder to a game, comparing it to the rush of being James Bond or Superman. In fact, he would confess in participating in at least 30 killings, describing how he volunteered for executions that others were too weak to carry out. Reda spoke about murder with a disturbing casualness, once telling authorities that if he ever missed a shot, he would kneel before his target, place the barrel of his gun against his target's forehead, and stare into their eyes as he pulled the trigger. Reda's killing spree spanned both sides of the border, with many of his hits occurring in Laredo, Texas. One time, he and his crew were ordered to kill this man named Miguel Flores. However, in a tragic mistake, they would assassinate his brother, Noah Flores, instead. The botched hit would eventually lead to Reda's downfall. Law enforcement got closer, linking him and his buddies to multiple murders through phone records and forensic evidence. In May 2006, Retta was arrested in Mexico for his involvement in a grenade attack on a bar in Monterrey that killed 4 people and wounded 25 others. Fearing for his life in a Mexican prison, he reached out to U.S. law enforcement begging for extradition. He knew that if he remained in Mexico, rival gangs or even his own cartel could easily have him killed. Eventually, he was sent to the U.S. to face justice. Once in custody, Retta confessed to his crimes in chilling detail. His interviews with police painted this picture of a young man who had become desensitized to violence, trained executioner who would speak about murder as if it were just another routine task.
No sense of remorse or...
Detectives were shocked by the contradiction between his youthful appearance and the monstrous acts he'd committed. In one of these videotaped confessions, he openly admits to enjoying the act of killing, showing no remorse for his victims. Now at his trial, prosecutors would lay out the extent of his crimes. Pled guilty to multiple murders, including the killing of Noah Flores and the assassination of a known drug dealer, Moses Garcia, whom he shot at least 7 times in front of his wife and child. The evidence against him was overwhelming, including forensic links and witness testimonies. Court sentenced him to a total of 70 years in prison, ensuring that he'd never walk free again. Following that, Retta adopted a bizarre and menacing appearance, paid a fellow inmate to tattoo his face with horn-like designs and flames, creating a demonic image that we guess reflects the darkness of his past. I don't know, he's housed now in Robertson Unit, a max security prison in Abilene, Texas, and he spends most of the day reflecting on the choices that led him to his fate. Maybe. Despite his incarceration, though, he remains a figure of infamy. Cautionary tale of how easily young lives can be swallowed up by the relentless.
So where are all these cartel members now? Wonder if they're going to be paying for him the rest of the life, sitting there in jail, paying for his food and his commissary. I really doubt that.
Grips of the cartel. Just a teenager here, Jacobo was ordered by the cartel to carry out a public execution of a rival. But little did he know that carrying out this assignment would mean the end of his usefulness to the cartel. Born in 2004, Jacobo grows up in the western Mexican state of Jalisco, a region notorious for being the stronghold of the CJNG. Now, his early life would also be marked with hardship, instability, and a lot of violence. He would struggle in school, get in trouble a lot, but it would be at home where he suffered the most. His mother once held his hands over an open flame after he was accused of pushing a classmate, an act he insists he never committed. However, by the age of 12, his life had taken a pretty dark turn, and he'd become a killer for the cartel. That time, Jacobo was desperate for money. A neighbor, likely connected to the cartel, approached him with this offer, a way to earn quick cash. He didn't hesitate. In a home where making ends meet was a daily struggle, where survival depended on finding whatever means necessary to get by, promise of money was enough. So his first assignment would be murder. Cartels prey on these kids like him, young, desperate, and easy to manipulate. So he took the job and was paid $1,500. That money, however, disappeared pretty quickly, partly because he began using methamphetamine, a habit that would numb the horrific weight of what he was doing. By his mid-teens, Jacobo had fully immersed himself in cartel violence. His role expanded beyond simple executions. He was now torturing people for information, using gruesome methods that included dismemberment and acid baths to dispose of bodies. Now, he wasn't out here just killing off enemies. He was sending messages. Fear was the cartel's greatest weapon.
It takes a whole new type of evil to be able to stick somebody in acid to get rid of the body. I'm so glad that we are going after these cartels now.
And Jacobo was an effective enforcer. He would carry out hits on the outskirts of Mexico City, far from the place he once called home. It was his last job, however, that sealed his fate. The cartel told him to carry out a public execution. This time, there were a lot of witnesses here. Police quickly caught wind of that murder, and suddenly, Jacobo was a fugitive. With law enforcement closing in, he went into hiding. Cartel, once his protector, now saw him as a liability. So they reach out and offer him a new place to hide. But it was a trap. When Jacobo arrived at the meeting spot, gunfire erupted. The very people who shaped him into a killer were now trying to eliminate him. They shot him in the head, back and abdomen, left for dead. But miraculously, he survived. However, survival came at a cost. He was now a prisoner, no longer a soldier for the cartel, but a criminal facing justice. So now at 17, Jacobo is serving a 4-year sentence for murder in a youth offender facility. Because you see, under Mexican law, juvie offenders receive lighter sentences, with most being released least before they turn 21. The reality of this weighs heavily on Jacopo. Although his name has been changed and his identity withheld, he knows that even once he's free, the cartel doesn't forget. He's seen it happen to others, former members trying to start over only to be hunted down. Now he understands that he's the target, totally useless to the organization that once paid him to kill. January 5th, 2015, a shocking picture of Jocelyn Nino, a foot soldier for the Gulf Cartel, went viral. However, as she soon found out, this 15 minutes of fame was what signed her death warrant. Jocelyn Alejandra Nino was born on October 26, 1995, in Tamaulipas, Mexico. And from a young age, she would live in a region deeply affected by cartel violence, where organized crime often dictated the course of people's lives. Little is known about her upbringing, but by her late teens, she'd already become deeply involved in the world of drug cartels. Known by her alias La Flaca, or the Skinny One, she was a member of the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's most notorious organizations. That nickname given to her by the cartel wasn't only a reference to her slender build, but also an homage to Our Lady of Holy Death, a female skeletal saint feared yet loved by many Mexicans, especially within the shadowy world of this drug trade. In fact, only the most dreaded female assassins were recognized by the name La Flaca and Nino, earning this recognition by being ruthless. So on January 5th, 2015, Nino gained notoriety on social media when this anonymous user posted a photograph of her posing with a firearm and wearing a bulletproof vest. The image was uploaded to Valor por Tamaulipas, a citizen journalist page, identifying her as a Gulf Cartel hitwoman operating in Rio Bravo, a town near the Texas border. In this picture, she's seen smiling confidently, her sunglasses resting on her head and a gold necklace visible around her neck. The post quickly went viral, sparking widespread discussion about her life, her role in the cartel, and the brutal reality of young assassins in Mexico. Nino belonged to the Gulf Cartel faction known as Los Ciclones, which were engaged in violent power struggles against their rival faction, Los Metros. Now, this internal conflict within the cartel had erupted in early 2015, with both sides engaging in brutal assassinations, kidnappings, and public executions to assert their own dominance. As a foot soldier, Nino played a direct role in this war, tasked with fighting off attacks from Los Metros into Rio Bravo. These assignments were pretty dangerous because this town was largely controlled by Los Metros, meaning that every operation she carried out was a high risk. Investigators feel that she was recruited into cartel life because of her youthful appearance, which allowed her to blend in more easily and avoid suspicion from law enforcement and rival gang members. Women in organized crime are often used as lookouts, couriers, or even lures to trap enemies. Some would start off as prostitutes even before given some responsibilities. But Nino, however, had managed to rise quickly through the ranks, becoming a full-fledged hitwoman and earning the respect of her faction. Between January and April 2015, the conflict between Los Ciclones and Los Metros had escalated. Cartel members began leaking images and personal information about their enemies on social media, a tactic designed to expose them to law enforcement or mark them for assassination. Investigators suspected that the leak of Nino's photograph was part of this ongoing digital warfare. It may have been orchestrated by Los Metros to weaken Los Ciclones by putting their operatives in the spotlight. So on April 13, 2015, Los Metros captured 19-year-old Nino, two of her fellow cartel members. The details of that abduction remain unclear, but what followed was an act of extreme brutality meant to send a powerful message. Mexican authorities discovered her dismembered body in an ice cooler, abandoned in a Matamoros parking lot. Her remains were found alongside those of another dismembered woman and a decapitated man, believed to be her accomplices from Los Ciclones. All three victims would show signs of severe torture, possibly suggesting their captors extracted information from them before killing them. Now, at the scene, investigators would also find a written message left by Los Metros, explicitly warning Los Ciclones that their members would also meet the same fate. The note criticized the faction for employing female sicarios, mocking them for relying on women in combat. The message was then signed by a member of Los Metros who goes by the moniker 65. Nino's body was so disfigured that the cops were only able to identify her remains because of a distinctive tattoo on her forearm displaying the word Nino, her surname. And at the same time, pictures of her body posted by Los Metros quickly surfaced online as another warning to her faction. Nino's death was just another casualty in this ongoing conflict, claimed tens of thousands of lives. The infight
Just another casualty, just another kid.
Where y'all from?
Sad. Ridiculous.
Within the Gulf cartel didn't end with her murder. Instead, it continued to escalate, with factions vying for control over lucrative drug trafficking routes.
Look into the eyes of Gabriel Cardona and you see a baby-faced 26-year-old. Then he blinks and you see something else.
In all, how many people did you kill?
No idea.
No idea. You lost track?
Yeah, so
Now, Gabriel Cardona's story is one of shocking transformation, from a promising young boy in Texas to one of the most feared teenage assassins in the world. This kid was born and raised in Laredo, Texas, and he would grow up in poverty, but would show intelligence and ambition at the same time. Now, as a child, he dreamt of becoming a lawyer, a goal that seemed achievable given his sharp mind. He would play football and read books. However, Cardona's life changed when he was benched during his sophomore year, leading him to drop out of school. Soon after, he got involved in petty crime, first by stealing cars and later by smuggling drugs and weapons across the U.S.-Mexican border. 2004, at the age of 17, Cardona found himself in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, working on a smuggling deal when corrupt officers finally caught him. Instead of arresting him, though, they bring him before Miguel Trevino, a high-ranking member of the Zetas cartel. The ruthless Trevino interrogates the teenager while holding a hand grenade. But Cardona isn't scared. He stays calm, which impresses Trevino, and as a result, he's recruited into the Zetas and sent to a brutal training camp in Tamaulipas. There, alongside other recruits, some as young as 15, they would train, and they were taught combat techniques by mercenaries from Colombia and Israel, learning how to kill efficiently. One of the most disturbing aspects of this training involved Contras, prisoners from rival cartels who were used as live training dummies, told the recruits to kill these captives in cold blood, reinforcing the culture of violence and desensitization. The first time that Cardona killed someone, his comrades celebrated the act, congratulating him on the initiation, and from then on, he continued to kill, following every order without hesitation. So as a Sicario now, Cardona carried out assassinations with chilling efficiency. He and a close buddy of his, Rosalio Retta, who we already talked about, were responsible for over 50 murders. The Zetas paid him well, offering bonuses for successful assassinations. The money allowed him to indulge in luxury, buying those expensive clothes and high-end vehicles. His life was all about drugs, money, and violence, with no regard for the lives he took. Now, believe it or not, Cardona didn't really enjoy the act of murder. However, he justified everything by believing that in the world of drug trafficking, there are no innocent people. He would rationalize that if he didn't kill his targets, someone else would. And with this mindset, Cardona eventually became the leader of one of the Gulf cartel's Sicario cells. He lived both in Laredo and Nuevo Laredo, balancing his life between two realities. So get this, in Texas, he maintained a romantic relationship with a girl named Christina, taking her to restaurants like Applebee's and pretending to be this normal teenager. But in Mexico, he's a feared Sicario, carrying out gruesome executions with zero remorse. But then on March 4th, 2008, Cardona's downfall would come when the Zetas decided to extend their reach into the U.S. Trevino ordered Cardona and Retta to carry out hits in Texas, targeting enemies on American soil now. Well, that move put him in the crosshairs of local law enforcement, and Laredo police investigator Robert Garcia began tracking him, determined to bring these young assassins to justice. In response, Trevino told the two to kill Garcia. However, before they could carry out that hit, both were arrested. March 2009, Cardona is given life in prison after being charged for his involvement in 5 murders and 4 attempted murders. During that trial, he sat behind a glass panel, speaking about his crimes with an unsettling calmness. He still had a boyish face, but his eyes, tattooed with additional eyelids, just kind of gave him an eerie appearance. When reporters asked him about how many people he killed, what he said shows you just how dangerous he was.
In all, how many people did you kill?
no idea.
No idea. You lost track?
Yeah, so
In fact, after they were captured, prosecutors said in court that Laredo's murder rate dropped by half. Unlike child soldiers in war-torn regions, Cardona received no sympathy from the justice system or even human rights organizations. There wasn't an effort to rehabilitate him, no therapy, and no reintegration into society. Instead, they were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Now Cardona didn't have his drugs to numb his mind, and he began experiencing nightmares, haunted by the violence he'd once committed. Despite it all, he still spoke fondly of Trevino, calling him a good man, really showing us that the psychological grip of the Zetas hadn't completely faded.
Baby-faced American teenager accused of working as an assassin for the South Pacific Drug Cartel was paraded in front of reporters.
It's 2010, and a shocking video of Edgar Jimenez Lugo spreads online. In the footage, he was seen decapitating an enemy, but few realize that this was only one small glimpse of something far more brutal. 1996, Edgar Jimenez Lugo was born in San Diego, California. And from the start, his life was also filled with instability. His parents were struggling with poverty and drug-related issues, and were unable to provide a stable home. In fact, shortly after his birth, traces of narcotics were found in Lugo's system, leading to the arrest of both his parents. And as a result, child welfare officials would take him and his siblings from their parents' custody while he was still young. His grandmother would become their legal guardian and take them all to Morelos, Mexico. So in 2004, Lugo's grandmother would sadly pass away, leaving him without a strong parental figure. Now, with no guidance or support, he drops out of school by third grade, and he would live in a region heavily controlled by drug cartels. So he quickly became exposed to some violent stuff. Without supervision and faced with extreme poverty, it's not hard to understand why he's an easy target for recruitment by cartel members. So it wouldn't take long before he was approached by some members of the BLO, a really powerful organization. At just 11 years old, he was recruited as a sicario by the leader of the Cartel del Pacifico Sur, Julio Hernandez Radilla, after his first brush with the law for assault and theft. Lugo's first task was to carry out executions, and he later admitted that his first kill happened when he was just a child. According to his own statements, he was told to kill under the threat of death, fearing that disobeying that would cost him his life. Over time, Lugo became known as El Ponchis, or the Cloak. His role in the cartel wasn't only to kill, torture before people were executed. He later confessed to slitting the throats of at least 4 people, but authorities believe that true numbers much higher. Videos and pictures of his gruesome crimes came up online, showing him and other cartel members posing with mutilated bodies. Well, that shocked the world, putting a spotlight on the use of child assassins in cartel operations. In 2010, Lugo's crimes became widely known after he appeared in this disturbing video describing his role in the cartel. Here, he would speak about killings that he carried out and the brutal methods that he used. Around the same time, another video surfaced, showing him participating now in the execution of a victim using a machete. That footage spread, causing national outrage and putting pressure on authorities to capture this kid. December 3rd, 2010, Lugo and his sister were arrested at the Mariano Matamoros Airport in the municipality of Temixco, Morelos, while trying to flee to the U.S. He was only 14 years old at the time. When questioned by authorities, he admitted to his crimes and explained that he had been forced into the cartel service. He claimed that he was paid $200 per week and was often under the influence of drugs while carrying out executions. Despite his young age, his confessions and the evidence against him made it pretty clear that he'd been deeply involved in cartel violence. Now in court, Lugo was found guilty of multiple murders, kidnapping, and organized crime activities. But because he was a minor, Mexican law only allowed for a max sentence of 3 years in juvie detention. That short punishment led to controversy, with many people questioning whether justice had truly been served. Now, some saw him as a victim of the cartel's manipulation, but others believed that he was fully aware of his actions and should face a longer sentence. November 2013, Lugo was released from prison 5 days earlier than expected. Due to good behavior, authorities stated he rehabilitated during his sentence and would continue receiving support after his release. However, many remain skeptical, fearing that wasn't enough to undo the damage caused by years of cartel violence. After his release, Lugo was sent to the U.S., reportedly to live in San Antonio, Texas. Now, the exact details of his whereabouts remain undisclosed, possibly to protect him from cartel retaliation. Some reports say that he was placed in a rehabilitation program to help him reintegrate into society, while many others fear that he might just return to a life of crime. April 25th, 2010, Raul Meza Torres was stopped by cops for driving a suspicious vehicle. So instead of complying, Torres tried pulling a stunt he did years earlier. This time, he didn't get away with it. Cesar Raul Meza Torres was born on October 31st, 1991 in Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, growing up in a family deeply involved in organized crime. His father, Raul Meza Ontiveros, also known as LM6, was a high-ranking leader in the Sinaloa cartel. His mother,
That's the worst. You want to be like your parents so bad, and your parents are doing bad. Your parents are doing drugs. Your parents are involved with drug cartels, and you want to do the same thing because you want to look up to your dad. Dad's your superhero. We got to do better with our children, guys. We got to. What is the future going to hold? If we don't, then ask yourself.
Ada Elizabeth Torres Felix was the sister of two well-known cartel figures, Javier and Manuel Torres Felix. From an early age, he was surrounded by people who were involved in drug trafficking. So by the time he was a teenager, Mesa Torres was already showing some interest in following in his father's footsteps. Many of his relatives had already been killed by law enforcement or rival gangs, but it didn't really seem to bother him. Now, he was known amongst his friends as El Mini Six, a nickname referencing his father. His social media presence made him popular, as he would often post pictures of himself posing with guns. These images made him a figure of admiration among other teenagers who wanted to join organized crime. And at the age of 15, Mesa Torres officially became involved in criminal activities, joining the Sinaloa cartel as a young sicario. His father was killed that same year, and the son would make his moves to establish his own reputation. October 9, 2007, Mesa Torres was arrested when transit police stopped him in Culiacan for driving in this armored vehicle without license plates. Since he was a minor, he was taken into custody, along with two other boys, but was later released. That marked the beginning of a series of encounters with law enforcement. Just 2 years later, he was involved in a shootout with cops in Las Quintas, Culiacan. He was drag racing when the cops tried to stop him, and instead of complying, the gunman opened fire on the officers. A shootout commences, and the attackers managed to flee, leaving behind an abandoned vehicle. When authorities investigated, they discovered that the vehicle belonged to Mesa Torres. Inside, they would find weapons and ammunition, with cartridges for high-caliber firearms. One police officer was injured in this attack, and by April 25, 2010, Mesa Torres' criminal career came to a violent end in Zapopan, Jalisco, when he was 18 years old. In the early hours of the morning, police officers were patrolling a neighborhood when they noticed a suspicious vehicle. They signaled the driver to pull over, but instead of cooperating, Mesa Torres and his accomplice, Fidel Rojas Felix, responded by brandishing their firearms. When the cops told them to surrender, they fired into the air to scare off the police, but the cops stood their ground and insisted they drop their weapons. Instead, Mesa Torres shot and killed an officer named Jaime Vicente Morales Dominguez, hitting him in the head. Another officer, Jose Luis Monroe, was wounded, but managed to return fire and hit Mesa Torres. After being shot, they rushed Torres to a private hospital, and he was pronounced dead shortly after. The autopsy revealed multiple blunt force injury to the head, in addition to the gunshot wounds that ultimately ended his life. His accomplice, Felix, who attempted to escape by jumping onto the roof of a nearby building, however, was arrested, and to the shock of police, he claimed that he was innocent and that he didn't know about Torres' cartel involvement. He also said the police tortured him and forced him to place his fingerprints on the weapons as evidence. Cops involved in the shootout, however, insist that Felix had also fired at him before trying to flee. In the end, Felix was charged with homicide and attempted homicide. His claims of innocence and police torture were dismissed by law enforcement. Authorities also connect him to a meeting with Ignacio Nacho Coronel Villarreal, another high-ranking Sinaloa cartel member, just days before the shooting. But still, Rojas Felix refused to provide further details and ended up facing a lengthy jail term.
Alright guys, that's the end of the video. All I got to say is that makes me very sad. I mean, I've known it's gone on, but watching this video and seeing these teenagers, basically just children, doing all these insane crimes and killings, it's just sad. So, till the next one, I'm out. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Bye, guys.